Verse 35. I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger, and he who believes in me will never thirst. I am the bread of life. I want us to camp on this tonight for a little while. And I want us to camp on it in two parts for this message. Number one, the bread of life. Bread of life. You know, you can go and find like bread at Costco and you get the 2 bags and pay. You can go to Walmart, get your bread. You can make your own bread. Some of us have bread makers at home. I went through a phase where I wanted to make bread and I made really fun bread. Make all kinds of bread. You can make, like sourdough bread. Bread. But what Jesus is talking about is a little bit different. Bread of life. But I like the idea of bread because bread means something that we almost all, I appreciate the gluten-free movement and all of that and, low carbs and keto diet and all those things. But the truth of it is throughout history, bread has been one of the main staples in the human diet, right? I mean, you're like, well, what about, so tortillas, naan, injera if you're from Ethiopia. I mean, every culture has their version of bread. Baozi, if you go to China. I mean, there's bread, all different kinds of bread. Bread. And I appreciate that Jesus, the very first thing he says is, love is the bread of life. Sustenance for your existence. And I want us to think about this for a little bit because bread relates to our appetites, what we want, what do we desire. Some of us are carb freaks. Pasta, bread is like, we're really passionate. Some of us, maybe your appetite isn't so much bread. Maybe you're more of a meat guy, and you're like, ooh, filet mignon, that would be fantastic. We can think about, and then some of us aren't necessarily like meat or bread, but we're totally into sweets. Anybody in the room a sweetaholic? Yep, totally get that. So these are things for our physical appetite. But I also want to push the envelope and say core appetite in my teens. In my 20s, I had an appetite to be smart. I want to be super, super smart. That's a long rabbit trail. When I was in my 30s and I started having children, I had an appetite for sleep. I still do. I have an appetite for sleep. When they're waking up at 2 and it's like social hour. Hey, 2 a.m. is not social hour. So in my 30s, I had an appetite for sleep. And I think if you look in your life, we all have appetites for different things. And we have appetites at different seasons in our lives. How many of you can identify what I'm saying? Had appetite for, different kinds of music. Had appetite for different kinds of exercise. Had appetite for, fancy cars or nice clothes or da-da-da-da-da. Pick something. But we all have appetites. And the thing about appetites is I don't really believe they're inherently bad or immoral, whatever. But I think what happens is if we let our appetites control our focus and our passion, then we can get ourselves in a world of hurt.